Hello and welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher podcast. I'm your host, Shannon Crow. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am so grateful for this land that I am recording on today, the land of the Anishinaabe, Odawa, and Mississauga people, which is about 3 hours north of Toronto on the Bruce Peninsula in Ontario, Canada. If you are new here, you might not know that I'm also a mom of 3. I need to give a shout out of happy birthday to my youngest, who will be 18 this week. Happy birthday, Sage. It is such a joy and such a privilege to watch you grow into the person that you are. I'm really excited because Sage is, becoming an official adult right now, also finishing up high school and taking on a carpentry apprenticeship. She's also just a really caring, sweet, wise individual. And so it is a really sweet thing just to think of who she's becoming in this world and being able to be a part of it as her mama. Also, if you're new here, you might not know that I'm also a yoga teacher and founder of Pelvic Health Professionals. Now, if you are a returning listener and you've been here before, you know how things go. This podcast was created for you, the yoga teacher, so that each and every week you are connected to information and ideas that are going to support you as you're building your yoga business. Many yoga teachers tell me that they became a yoga teacher because they felt the benefits of yoga and then wanted to share that with others. But they also tell me that sometimes they really struggle to have a personal yoga practice now that they are a yoga teacher. I hear from yoga teachers who tell me that they don't have enough time, they're really busy, they're tired, they don't feel motivated to do their own practice, they have other priorities, they're caring for others in their life, or they're waiting for their schedule, their space, or their body or mental state to be better, to be more perfect. Or this really curious one that makes me think all the time, I hear from people who say, I live with people who it would feel weird to do yoga around them. I can't do yoga around my partner or my family in some way. Or the flip, I hear people tell me I live alone and so I'm not motivated to do yoga. If I lived with someone, I would feel more motivated to do yoga. My guess is that you're like me and you might hear some voices that have played around in your head or things that you have said as a yoga teacher as I read through this quick list. And so I am not pointing this out to point fingers or place blame or make you feel guilty or shame. That's already going on. Today's episode is all about helping you to build and create a personal practice. Now, before we dive in, I also want to give a huge shout out to our sponsor, OfferingTree, who brings us today's episode. This is an easy-to-use, all-in-one online platform for yoga teachers that can help you if you're looking to create a personal website, if you need help with booking, payments, blogging, and many other great features. Now, if you go over and sign up at offeringtree.com/Shannon, you'll get 50% off your first 3 months or 15% off any annual plan. I really love working with OfferingTree because they support yoga teachers by sharing this podcast with you, but they're also a public benefit company whose mission is to further wellness access and education for everyone. Today's episode is also brought to you by Pelvic Health Professionals. This is an online membership for yoga teachers, PTs, movement educators, healthcare professionals, and really anyone who wants to learn more about pelvic health. In there, we hire monthly guest experts to teach us the most up-to-date information. You can attend live calls or catch the replays, get your questions answered, and take a look at our very in-depth notes that we take for you. Visit pelvichealthprofessionals.com to sign up. All right, so let's talk about what is holding you back from creating a self-care practice that is nurturing for you. That might be nurturing your body, your mind, your spirit, your mental health, whatever that is. Think of right now, and maybe you want to jot this down, what are the things that are holding you back? I've borrowed some words from yoga teachers who have told me that they're struggling right now with their personal practice, and I'm going to share some snippets of that with you. One person was telling me, I really have no steady personal practice. Another person told me that they were avoiding their yoga mat for some reason. They weren't sure why, but they were really feeling like they were avoiding it. One yoga teacher told me, I need to do my personal practice more often because it feels really great after, but I just don't have time. Another teacher talked about feeling guilty when they're not practicing enough. Another one told me that they really feel inspired from their own practice, but at the moment they were just feeling exhausted, so the practice was very short or looked a little bit different than a traditional asana practice. Another yoga teacher wrote to me and said, I recognize I put a lot of pressure on myself, yet my question still stands. For an entrepreneur like myself, how do I structure all of the pieces in to make this work? And lastly, another yoga teacher said, I miss my practice so much. The little I get to do is highly valuable for me, and I really feel it if I miss my practice completely. In this, I want you to know that you are not alone. Many yoga teachers tell me that now that they have become yoga teachers, they struggle to fit in a personal yoga practice. And as you can see, the emotions run high here. And yoga teachers know that they feel better, they feel the benefits when they fit yoga in, but for whatever reason, it's not happening right now. And this is where I've got you with this podcast episode. It's here for you whenever you are feeling like you want to build in a personal practice or strengthen your yoga practice, or maybe bump it up a little bit and do a little bit more of your own personal practice. And before we get right into the details of that, of what I think has been really helpful for me, because I've danced around this a lot in my own life and I've helped other yoga teachers with it, I want to recap and let you know that back in episode 308, so a couple of episodes back, we talked about rest and refuel time. And this is when you feel like, you know what, I don't even have enough energy. I don't know how I'm going to get through today. And I want you to remember to go back to that episode if things feel really overwhelming. I put it there on purpose so that you're building tiny, tiny baby steps right now. So that might be your practice. It might be one breath or one moment where you're checking in with yourself, and that's really to sustain you through the tough days. So go back to that if you're feeling like, oh yeah, I'm exhausted, I'm tired, I'm overwhelmed, I'm worn out. That episode is there for you. And then last week, episode 309, I talked about the seasons of business, and this can also be the seasons of life. And I just want to reiterate one thing from that episode. If you don't want to go back and listen to the whole thing, you might need to decrease your expectations of your personal yoga practice depending on what life is throwing at you right now. Or you might need to strengthen your boundaries or let something go that is not your top priority. So, for example, if you are caring for elders in your life or children or a new puppy, you may really be in a season of care and you might have less time right now for a personal practice. So remember when I said my youngest baby is 18? That means I have 3 kids that are all now officially adults. My life looks very different than when they were all toddlers and young kids at home, needing me to do so much for them for their care. That means that my time looks very different than it did back then, and we need to take that into account when we're looking at our personal practice. Next, why would we do this? Why are we so worried about our personal yoga practice? We know this because your personal practice is an amazing source of fuel for your life and business. It's like a promise that you make to yourself. Even when you feel like you can't count on things outside of yourself, maybe others or what is happening in life, your personal practice is something that you can count on. It's kind of the center of things. And as you build this self-care practice, please create something that exists sort of in your dreams. Build it right now. This is one of the perks of being an entrepreneur, of being a small business owner, of also being a yoga teacher. So you might have this idea like someday this is what my personal yoga practice or my self-care practice will look like. Build that now. Don't wait for the someday of it. Build your ideal personal practice, and you'll slowly see that your ideal schedule will also build out of that. So what does that look like for you? What really would be ideal? Also, let's dig in right here to what's the intention of your personal practice. So maybe you really need nurturing self-care, but there might be other times where you need to build focus or strength in your body, or you need some more down regulation of the nervous system, or maybe you have had pain in your body that you're healing from. Your personal practice is very individual and it changes too. So keep the intention in mind, but also let's go back to what does that dream personal practice look like? So let me paint a picture here for a moment. Maybe that looks like you slowly making yourself a tea in the morning, the house is quiet, and then you curl up by the fire with a blanket and your journal and a favorite pen. And after you have some time to reflect and maybe look out the window at the new day, then maybe you move in some way. Now I want to pause here for a moment. One, this is kind of one version of what my individual practice looks like. It might sound cheesy to you. It might not be a fit at all for what you want your personal practice to look like. Mine is in the morning. Maybe yours feels really good right before bed. Choose what feels good to you. And if what I'm saying to you right now feels like, oh gosh, that's not even possible, that is some far off dream, as soon as my feet hit the floor in the morning, I'm chasing after kids, or my schedule is not my own, that's not at all what it looks like. I want you to dig into that. So it might be the season that you're in right now, but you also might be holding yourself back. And I also want you to pause before we jump into the movement part of things, if that is even in your ideal personal practice. Please remember that you don't need to choose movement out of social pressure and shoulds. And you don't need to choose movement at all. It really depends on what feels good to you. What do you need right now? What is your intention? So if movement's there, if movement feels good for you, what would feel great today? What would nurture you? What would help you? What do you need? Don't choose something that is about changing you, especially when it has to do with the shape of your body, please. That is something outside of us. That's where society is talking to us and sending some weird, messed up messages about how our body needs to be different than it is right now. Please notice when that comes up. Also, yoga, asana, may not feel nurturing to you right now. This has really come up for me as a yoga teacher when I get stuck in the yoga teacher mindset, when I get stuck planning classes as I start moving, or I start thinking about teaching, or my mind wanders off to business and like the email I'm going to send out. That has happened to me in the past before, for sure. And if that is happening to you, my biggest helpful tip in this is make a list of other movement ideas that bring you joy. Maybe that's walking outside daily, or swimming, or dancing around to fun music. And then take these movement ideas and start to become a scientist about this. And ask yourself, what does it feel like to do this for a set amount of time daily? So as the scientist, I'm asking you to try this out for a set number of days for a reason. You could choose, 21 days, 40 days, 90 days. Personally, I like to set 90-day goals for my habits and my routines and my personal stuff. And I really like to set them small when it's something new or when I'm restarting, which happens a lot with my personal yoga practice. So I get easily thrown off my daily routine or my personal yoga practice, even when I know how much it benefits me. It could be something as simple as it's Christmas holidays in our house and everyone's routine is different and my routine is different. And maybe we have some late nights and that might throw everything off, and it can be hard to get restarted in it. But when I have this goal for a set amount of time, it brings me a lot of comfort. Now, I learned this back in yoga teacher training long ago. We would do meditation for 90 days, and then we would journal about it. So we would journal before we started. How do I think this is going to impact me? What are my intentions for this meditation, etc.? And then reflect back after 90 days or the length of time that you choose. And I found so much comfort in this. And I like being the scientist in this. I like to really dig in and see, how am I feeling now after 90 days? And, when I reflect back on all of these journal entries, what can I see happening in those entries and what can I notice in myself? Now, the movement that you choose might be the same every single day, or it may differ. It may really depend on what you need in that day. So the biggest thing here is to check in with yourself before you start moving and ask yourself, what do I need today? Okay, before I get into a few more things, I want to pop in here for a moment, Connected Yoga Teachers, to tell you about how I personally am using OfferingTree to book in podcast guests. And I'm so happy with how it's working. And I want to tell you because I think it really applies to your business. I'm happy with it because everything feels so automatic. So I share one link with people who are booking in with me for a podcast interview. And right away, they can see my availability on my calendar. And then they can book in depending on when they are available. And so that takes away that back and forth emailing that often would happen with podcast interviews. Then from there, everything is automated. Text reminders go out, email reminders, the Zoom link. I record my podcast episodes on Zoom, so it really helps that OfferingTree has Zoom integration. And I want to tell you about this, not because I think everyone should have a podcast. I want to tell you because if you are booking people in for your one-on-one sessions, your classes, your workshops, your trainings, retreats, or any other events, if you need to take online payments, if you do online classes on Zoom, or if you're wanting to build a website, make sure to check out OfferingTree. If you want to spend less time in front of a computer screen and you want more things to just happen automatically, OfferingTree is a great place to start. And we have a discount code for you. That's over at offeringtree.com/Shannon. Now let's get back into how we can build our personal yoga practice and make this a routine. The reason why we are trying to make this a routine is that similarity and routine really brings us comfort as humans, and it really helps us to build it into being a habit. Think about brushing your teeth. That becomes, for me anyway, a daily habit that I look forward to. And I really notice if I haven't brushed my teeth. It's such a habit now. And that's what we want our yoga practice to be like. Now, there's 2 great episodes that I'll link to in our show notes that helped me to reframe how I was looking at building this as a habit. We did these 2 podcast episodes with Matt Kowald and James Clear, and again, I'll link to them in the show notes. One key thing that I have found to be helpful in building my ideal daily self-care practice or my yoga routine is to really either write it out, what that looks like, or gather images that remind you of what you're doing and put that somewhere where you see it. So I want you to take some time to outline, what does this look like? And let go of what others think this should look like. Sometimes yoga teachers will tell me, I want to do an hour-long yoga asana practice that leaves me like sweating and really warm and that builds in strengthening as well. And I want to dig into why is that? Is that because it feels amazing in your body? And if so, go for it. But really dig into what's the thing that I need in the next 90 days? Or what's the thing that I just need this week? What would really fuel me this week? Another tip that I find so helpful is after we've done this planning is to set this up like you're starting tomorrow. So put your yoga mat out, set your alarm, get enough sleep. James Clear talks about habit stacking in the podcast that we did together. So what habits do you need to put in place to build your personal practice? If you want to get up in the morning and you're trying to set your alarm for an hour earlier, you may need to look at your sleep schedule and setting up this habit of, shutting down screens at a certain time and getting enough sleep. Another thing that's helpful for me when I go to set my 90-day personal goals is using the SMARTER framework. And I talk about this in episode 253. It's part of the Reflect and Plan 4-part series. So I don't want to go right into it, but I will link to it in our show notes so that you can go have a listen to that 4-part series, but especially the last part where I talk about SMARTER goals. Another part of this for me is not breaking my streak. I sometimes use a calendar, I sometimes use a list with check boxes, or I sometimes have used Insight Timer because it will track my streak and remind me to not miss a day. Another helpful thing for me in the past and for other yoga teachers, and this I want to remind you is optional if it feels like this isn't going to be helpful right now, is to get a mentor. Now, we talked about this back in episode 53 with Chase Bossart about finding a yoga mentor and the importance of that. I just want to say that if you are feeling right now that your time or your finances are not going to allow you to do that, or if you're like, well, I need to do that before I start my personal practice, I want to challenge you and say, could your personal practice today be asking yourself what you need, finding one breath, and maybe one small movement? Because I think sometimes saying, I need to find the perfect yoga mentor can be one of those things that kind of holds us back and we're waiting and putting it on the back burner. Another helpful thing is accountability. So you could tell our Facebook group, it's called the Connected Yoga Teacher Facebook group. If you go to our homepage, theconnectedyogateacher.com, you can see how you can join that group. That's a great place where you can say, okay, I listened to this episode on creating my yoga routine, and here's what I'm going to do. And putting it out there sometimes is really helpful. You could post it on Instagram. You could post it on your own personal Facebook. You could tell a friend. You could message me on Instagram or Facebook and tell me that you're going to do that. Or you can email me, Shannon@theconnectedyogateacher.com. I really try to read all of the emails from podcast listeners, especially if you're on our email list and I send out an email. I look for the replies that you all send to those emails that go out. So try it. Email me. If I don't see it the first time, bump it up again and tell me, did you see this, Shannon? I'm going to do this for my own personal yoga practice. It just really can help when we tell someone else. Putting it out there can really help with our accountability. All right. And now what happens when life throws you off track or something comes up or you miss a day of this daily practice and you've really made this promise to yourself? First of all, don't beat yourself up. It just doesn't help when we are like, I'm a terrible person. I never get to my mat. This isn't working. I'm an awful yoga teacher. I should be like this person over here who meditates every day. This doesn't help. That's not how we would treat a friend if they told us that they missed their yoga practice or fell away from it. When you set this goal of so many days, try not to miss more than one day in a row. And remember, if you do, you're not going to beat yourself up about it. You're just going to start again, day one. Also, ask yourself, do I need to shorten the time for this right now? Your personal practice can be 1 minute long, and that's okay. You can build it as time moves on if things allow for that right now. Having a really long yoga practice doesn't mean that you're a better person or a better yogi or a better yoga teacher. You could do 2 hours of yoga and not be in the moment at all with your body, with your mind, what's going on. So it's not the length of time that matters. You really want to be checking in and making sure this is my personal practice. This is my time. And a personal practice is just that. It is all for you so that you can show up for yourself in your day. You can show up for your work and you can show up for the people that you interact with during the day. And that includes your close friends and family and your pets that live with you. But it also includes, the random customer service person that you're emailing or you're calling. I want to tell you about something that I've noticed because, like I said, I like to be that scientist. Every Friday, I fill out my CEO report. And if you want to hear more about my CEO report, please ask me and I'll do a whole podcast episode on it. So in that CEO report, one question I ask myself is, how am I feeling by the end of my work week? And when I have a solid personal practice, and it's ongoing, I can really see the difference. I just have more fuel in my tank. I'm generally feeling better about both work and life, and it shows up in that question. So why do I fall off the track here with this and miss doing my personal practice? Why do I fall away from it? Well, for me, I just know it just happens. And the less I beat myself up about it, and just come back to it, the better things go. So this podcast is here for you whenever you fall away from your personal practice or whenever you feel like you want it to be something different. Just come back to this episode. And I would love to hear from you. I've listed all of the things that I can think of that help me to maintain or create a personal yoga routine. What helps you when you fall away from it? Or what helps you when you're like, yes, I am doing this every single day and sticking with it? How do you do that? Tell us your secrets. Tell us your tips and ideas. Tell us your struggles if you want to share that. You can share in the show notes. So if you head over to theconnectedyogateacher.com/310, because this is episode 310, then you can share there, or you can share in our Facebook group, or there's a way to send a voice message over on our website. That's over at theconnectedyogateacher.com. I love to hear from podcast listeners. So thank you so much if you take the time to reply and let me know about today's episode or another one. And also huge shout out of thanks to those who have left a review. If you haven't, go do that right now. It means a lot to us when you share the podcast and tell others what you think about it. If you want to hang out in real time this month, if you're listening before February the 13th, 2023, we are going to be talking about birth positions with Brittany Sharp McCollum inside of Pelvic Health Professionals. I'm really excited because a lot of you teach prenatal yoga and those people are getting ready to birth babies. And a lot of the birth positions can be worked into your prenatal yoga classes. So if you want to check that out and all of the other things over at Pelvic Health Professionals, go to pelvichealthprofessionals.com. Next week on the podcast, I have a tiny bit more to add in about our personal yoga practice. And it's a way for me to check in with you as much as I can as a podcaster. So if you are feeling like, okay, Shannon, I've taken all of these tips, but I'm still not fitting in my personal yoga practice, I've got you covered next week. Thank you to our entire team over here who makes the podcast possible, Suzanne, Crunch, and Sinead. And thank you to you, dear listener. You make this podcast possible. Without your listening ears and your time, it just wouldn't even exist. So thank you. It means a lot that you've spent today listening. I really hope that this helps you to build and grow your personal yoga routine. And I'm curious then what you will be doing this week to stay connected to your personal practice. so that you can share the yoga that lights you up.